The sun beat mercilessly on the Montana plains as Lillian Anderson collapsed to her knees, the weight of her tattered carpetbag pulling her down like an anchor. Her once pristine blue traveling dress was now covered in dust and sweat stains after 3 days of desperate walking. The stagecoach robbery had left her alone, miles from civilization, with nothing but the clothes on her back, a few personal possessions, and the last of her dwindling hope. "I can't," she whispered, her cracked lips forming the words as she stared at the endless horizon. Butte was still miles away, visible as just a smudge in the distance. The summer of 1878 had brought a relentless heat wave to Montana territory, and Lillian's strength had finally given out. That was when she heard the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Her heart raced with both hope and fear. In these lawless territories, a lone traveler could be salvation or damnation. "Madam? You all right there?" The deep voice carried concern, not threat. Lillian turned her head with effort, squinting against the sun to see a tall figure on horseback. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dusty ground. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. I was robbed. The stagecoach. 3 days ago," she managed. "I've been walking toward Butte since." The stranger knelt beside her, and she got her first good look at him. Sun-bronzed skin, eyes the color of a summer sky, and concern etched across his features. "Name's Matthew Zimmerman. Most folks call me Matt." "Lillian Anderson," she replied, attempting to stand and failing, her legs buckling beneath her. "Miss Anderson, you're in no condition to walk another step," Matt said firmly, sizing up the situation. Without warning, he scooped her up in his arms as if she weighed no more than a child. "Butte's still about 5 miles off. My horse can carry us both." Lillian wanted to protest, to insist on her independence as she had done her entire life, but exhaustion won out. Thank you," she whispered, her head falling against his chest as he carried her to his horse. "You just hold on," Matt said, settling her in front of him on the saddle. "I'll get you to safety." As they rode toward Butte, Lillian drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the strong arms holding her steady and the gentle sway of the horse beneath them. She had come west to escape her past in Boston to start anew as a schoolteacher in a growing frontier town. Never had she imagined her new life would begin in the arms of a cowboy. Matt kept one arm firmly around the woman's waist as he guided his horse along the trail to Butte. She was clearly exhausted beyond measure, occasionally stirring against him only to fall back into a fitful sleep. Her determination impressed him. Walking for 3 days in this heat would have killed most folks. "Almost there, Miss Anderson," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she heard him. The town of Butte was growing larger on the horizon, its mining operations visible even from this distance. The copper boom had transformed the settlement from a small mining camp into a burgeoning town almost overnight. As they approached the outskirts, Lillian stirred again. Where will you take me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Holloway runs a boarding house for respectable ladies. She's a good woman. She'll help get you sorted," Matt explained. "I do some work for her husband when I'm in town." Lillian nodded weakly. "My position? I'm supposed to be the new schoolteacher. They're expecting me tomorrow." Matt couldn't help but smile. This woman had been robbed, abandoned, and forced to walk for days in the scorching heat, yet her concern was still for her responsibilities. "I reckon they'll understand the delay, considering the circumstances." They rode down the main street of Butte, drawing curious glances from townsfolk. Matt ignored them, focused on getting Lillian to safety. The Holloway boarding house stood at the end of Cedar Street, a 2-story white building with green shutters and a wide front porch. Matt dismounted carefully, then lifted Lillian down from the saddle. Despite her protests that she could walk now, her legs gave out immediately. Without hesitation, he carried her up the steps and knocked on the door with his boot. The door swung open to reveal a plump, middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression shifted from annoyance to concern in an instant. "Matthew Zimmerman, what have you brought to my doorstep this time?" she asked, though her tone held no real accusation. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Lillian Anderson. She's your new schoolteacher, or will be once she's had a chance to recover." Stagecoach was robbed 3 days back. She's been walking ever since. Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened. Good heavens. Bring her in this instant. Matt carried Lillian through the doorway and followed Mrs. Holloway to a small but clean bedroom on the first floor. Put her here, Mrs. Holloway instructed, pulling back the bed covers. I'll fetch water and something for her to eat. Matt gently laid Lillian on the bed. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. Matt adjusted his hat awkwardly. No need for that, Miss Anderson. Just doing what any decent man would. Few men I've known would carry a stranger 5 miles, she replied, a ghost of a smile crossing her parched lips. Before Matt could respond, Mrs. Holloway bustled back in with a pitcher of water. Out with you now, Matthew. This young lady needs rest and privacy. Matt nodded, tipping his hat to Lillian. I'll check in on you tomorrow, if that's all right. I'd like that, Lillian said, her voice already stronger after just a few sips of water. As Matt turned to leave, Mrs. Holloway followed him to the door. That poor girl's half dead from exposure, she whispered. What kind of monsters would leave a woman alone on the trail like that? The kind I aim to find, Matt replied, his voice hardening. The Blackwell gang has been hitting stagecoaches all summer. This is the 3rd one this month. Don't you go doing anything foolish, Mrs. Holloway warned. Sheriff Jenkins should handle this. Matt's laugh was humorless. Jenkins couldn't find his own shadow at high noon. He adjusted his gun belt. I'll be back tomorrow to check on Miss Anderson. Please tell her. He paused, unsure what he wanted to say. Just tell her I'll be back. With that, he descended the porch steps, mounted his horse, and rode toward the sheriff's office. Someone needed to know about the latest robbery, even if Jenkins was unlikely to do anything about it. As he rode, Matt found himself thinking about Lillian Anderson's determined spirit. Most city women would have fallen apart after such an ordeal. Instead, she'd walked for 3 days through merciless terrain. There was something special about her, something that made him want to know more. Lillian woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, the softness of the bed beneath her a stark contrast to the hard ground where she'd spent the past 3 nights. Ah, you're awake. Mrs. Holloway entered carrying a tray. How are you feeling this morning, dear? The events of the previous day came flooding back, her collapse on the trail, the cowboy who'd carried her to safety. Much better, thank you, Lillian replied, carefully sitting up. Her body ached, but the desperate thirst and exhaustion had subsided. I cannot thank you enough for your kindness. Nonsense, Mrs. Holloway said, placing the tray on Lillian's lap. Now eat up. You need your strength. The tray held a bowl of porridge, toast with jam, and a cup of steaming coffee. Lillian hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma hit her. I've sent word to Mr. Peterson at the school that you've arrived, but need a few days to recover, Mrs. Holloway continued. He was most understanding and sends his regards. Lillian nodded gratefully, taking a sip of coffee. And Mr. Zimmerman? Has he been by? Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled knowingly. Not yet, but he said he'd return today. That man keeps his word, even if he doesn't keep much else. What do you mean? Lillian asked, curiosity piqued. Matt Zimmerman's a good man at heart, but he's what you might call untethered. Mrs. Holloway busied herself straightening the room. Works as a ranch hand here and there. Does some scouting for the army occasionally. Tracks outlaws when the bounty's worth his while. Never stays in one place too long. Lillian absorbed this information, unsure why it mattered to her. He was very kind to help me. Yes, that's Matt. Kind to a fault when it matters. Mrs. Holloway paused at the door. When you're finished eating, there's a bath drawn in the washroom. I've laid out one of my daughter's old dresses for you. She's about your size and away in Helena for the season. We can see about replacing your things once you're on your feet again. Left alone, Lillian finished her breakfast and allowed herself to think about Matthew Zimmerman. There had been something in those blue eyes, a gentleness that belied his rugged exterior. She found herself hoping he would indeed return as promised. After her bath, dressed in a simple but well-made blue cotton dress, Lillian felt almost human again. She was brushing her long chestnut hair when a knock came at the door. Come in, she called, expecting Mrs. Holloway. Instead, Matthew Zimmerman stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking considerably cleaner than when she'd last seen him. His light brown hair was damp and combed back, and he'd shaved the stubble from his jaw, revealing a strong, handsome face. "Miss Anderson," he said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "You're looking much improved." Lillian felt a blush creep up her neck. "Thanks to your help, Mr. Zimmerman. Please, come in." Matt stepped into the room, still clutching his hat. "I spoke to Sheriff Jenkins about the robbery. He claims he'll look into it, but—" He shrugged, clearly doubtful. "I don't expect they'll recover my things," Lillian said pragmatically. "I'm just grateful to be alive." "What brought you to Butte?" Matt asked, taking the chair she offered him. "It's not exactly the first choice for most Eastern ladies." Lillian smiled faintly. "I wanted a fresh start. Teaching positions are competitive in Boston, and when I saw the advertisement for Butte, it seemed providential." Matt studied her face, sensing there was more to her story. Running to something or away from something? "Perhaps both," she admitted, surprised by her own candor. "My father died last year. There was pressure for me to marry a man I did not love." She looked away. "I chose independence instead." Matt nodded slowly. "Brave choice. Braver still to come all this way alone," says the man who apparently wanders the territory with no permanent home. Lillian countered with a small smile. He laughed at that, a warm sound that made her heart beat a little faster. "Touché, Miss Anderson." "Lillian, please," she said impulsively. "After carrying me 5 miles, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Lillian," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "Then you must call me Matt." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds. The moment was broken by Mrs. Holloway bustling in with a tea tray. "I thought you might want refreshments," she said, her knowing glance moving between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," Lillian said, composing herself. "Actually, I came with a proposition," Matt said once Mrs. Holloway had left. "I need to ride out to the Peterson ranch today. Mr. Peterson, the school board president, is there, and I thought you might want to meet him before you start teaching. The fresh air would do you good, and it's not a long ride." Lillian hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough yet." "We'd go slow, and you'd ride with me," Matt said. "And we'd be back well before dark." The prospect of spending more time with this intriguing man was tempting, as was the chance to meet her employer. "Very well," she decided. "If Mrs. Holloway thinks I'm up to it, I'd like to go." Matt's smile was worth her agreement. "I'll let her know. Be ready in an hour." After he left, Lillian wondered if she was being foolish. She barely knew this man. Yet something about Matthew Zimmerman made her feel safer than she'd felt in a very long time. True to his word, Matt returned an hour later. Mrs. Holloway had insisted Lillian borrow a riding skirt and blouse from her daughter's wardrobe, and now she stood on the porch, looking more like a proper Western woman than the bedraggled Easterner of yesterday. "You clean up nice," Matt said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, I understand the compliment," Lillian assured him with a smile. "Thank you." Matt helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The closeness was both terrifying and thrilling, his chest against her back, his arms around her to hold the reins. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Yes," she managed, though her heart was racing. They rode slowly out of town, Matt pointing out landmarks and telling her about Butte's rapid growth since the discovery of copper. Lillian found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait and the sound of Matt's voice. "How long have you been in Montana territory?" she asked as they crossed a small stream. "Born here," Matt replied. "My pa was a trapper who settled down with my ma, a schoolteacher like yourself. They had a small ranch outside Helena." "Had?" Lillian asked gently. "Both gone now. Pa 5 years back, ma last winter." His voice was matter of fact, but Lillian sensed the grief beneath it. "I'm sorry," she said, resisting the urge to cover his hand with hers. "Life out here is hard," Matt said simply, "but it's free in a way the East could never be. At least that's what Ma always said. She came from Philadelphia originally. Is that why you prefer to keep moving? For the freedom?" Lillian asked. Matt was quiet for a moment. "Partly. And partly because staying in one place means building something that can be taken away." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "I understand that fear," she admitted. "After my father died, everything I thought was secure vanished overnight." They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. The landscape was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in prairie grass, distant mountains rising majestically against the blue sky. Lillian found herself falling in love with this wild, beautiful country. "There's the Peterson place," Matt said eventually, pointing to a large ranch house nestled in a valley ahead. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and cattle grazed in fenced pastures. As they approached, a tall man with graying hair emerged from the barn. "Matt Zimmerman." "Wasn't expecting you today," he called, approaching as Matt helped Lillian dismount. "Mr. Peterson, this is Miss Lillian Anderson, your new schoolteacher," Matt said. "Thought I'd bring her out to meet you since she had a bit of trouble on her journey." Peterson's eyes widened. "The stagecoach robbery? That was you? Good Lord, Miss Anderson, we've been worried sick when you didn't arrive as scheduled." "I apologize for the delay," Lillian said formally. "I was fortunate that Mr. Zimmerman found me on the road yesterday." Peterson shook his head. "No apologies needed. Come inside, both of you. Martha will want to meet you." Martha Peterson proved to be a warm, maternal woman who fussed over Lillian, insisting she eat a large lunch while discussing plans for the upcoming school year. The Petersons had 5 children of their own, 3 still school-aged, and were passionate about education. "We've got 28 students enrolled so far," Martha explained. "Ages 6 to 16. The schoolhouse is new, just finished it this spring. With proper desks and a bell and everything," Peterson added proudly. "The town's growing fast. Might need another teacher soon if the trend continues." Lillian found herself genuinely excited about the prospect of teaching here. The Petersons were clearly committed to providing a good education, despite the frontier setting. Throughout the conversation, she was acutely aware of Matt, who sat quietly contributing occasionally, but mostly watching her. His gaze made her self-conscious in a not unpleasant way. After lunch, Peterson insisted on showing Lillian around the property. "You should see how a proper Montana ranch operates," he declared. "Most of your students will be from ranching families." As they walked toward the corrals, Matt fell into step beside Lillian. "Peterson's one of the good ones," he said quietly. "Built this place from nothing 10 years ago. He and his wife seem wonderful," Lillian agreed. "I'm feeling much better about my decision to come here." Matt smiled. "Butte's growing, but it's still rough around the edges. Not all the miners and cowboys are gentlemen." "I'm tougher than I look," Lillian assured him. "I did walk 3 days through the wilderness, after all." "That you did," Matt acknowledged, respect evident in his voice. "Still, it wouldn't hurt to learn a few things about frontier life. Survival skills. Are you offering to teach me, Mr. Zimmerman?" Lillian asked, raising an eyebrow. "If you're willing to learn." "Lillian," he replied, using her first name deliberately. Before she could respond, Peterson called them over to see a new foal. The moment passed, but Lillian found herself intrigued by the offer. Learning from Matt would mean spending more time with him, a prospect she found increasingly appealing. They stayed at the Peterson ranch longer than intended, the afternoon slipping away in pleasant conversation. By the time they mounted up to return to town, the sun was already beginning its descent toward the western mountains. "We should hurry," Matt said as he helped Lillian into the saddle. "I don't want Mrs. Holloway worrying." The ride back was quieter, both tired from the day's activities. Lillian found herself leaning back against Matt's chest, taking comfort in his solid presence. How strange that this man who had been a stranger only yesterday now felt like a trusted friend. "Thank you for today," she said as they approached Butte. "Meeting the Petersons has set my mind at ease." "They're good people," Matt agreed. "The town's full of them, mixed in with the rougher sort. You just need to know who's who. Perhaps you could introduce me to more of the good people?" Lillian suggested. Matt chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against her back. "I could do that, though some might question whether I belong in that category myself." "I don't," Lillian said firmly. "Question it, I mean. You're a good man, Matthew Zimmerman." They reached the boarding house just as twilight was settling over Butte. Mrs. Holloway stood on the porch, arms crossed but expression relieved when she spotted them. "Was beginning to think you'd run off with her, Matthew," she called as they dismounted. "Just lost track of time at the Petersons," Matt explained, helping Lillian down. Lillian swayed slightly as her feet touched the ground, her legs unaccustomed to riding. Matt caught her elbow to steady her, and the contact sent a jolt of awareness through her. "Thank you again," she said, looking up into his eyes. "My pleasure," he replied softly. "I'll come by tomorrow, if that's all right. Maybe show you around town a bit. I'd like that very much, Lillian said, suddenly shy. Mrs. Holloway cleared her throat pointedly from the porch. Supper's waiting, Miss Anderson. And you're welcome to join us, Matthew, since you've appointed yourself Miss Anderson's guide. Matt grinned. Never been one to turn down your cooking, Mrs. Holloway. The evening passed pleasantly in the Holloways' comfortable dining room. Mr. Holloway, a taciturn but kind man, joined them, asking Lillian about her journey west and her plans for teaching. Matt was quieter than he had been during their ride, but Lillian caught him watching her often, a thoughtful expression on his face. Each time their eyes met, she felt that same spark of connection. After supper, Matt rose to leave. I'll be by mid-morning tomorrow, he promised. There's a lot of Butte you should see before you start teaching. I look forward to it, Lillian replied, meaning it sincerely. That night, as she lay in bed, Lillian thought about how drastically her life had changed in just 2 days. The stagecoach robbery had seemed like a disaster, but had it not happened, she might never have met Matthew Zimmerman. The thought troubled her. She barely knew this man, yet already he was becoming important to her. Be careful, Lillian, she whispered to herself in the darkness. You came west to be independent, not to lose your heart to the first kind man you meet. But as she drifted off to sleep, it was Matt's face. She saw those blue eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. The next morning dawned clear and cooler than previous days. Lillian dressed carefully in another of Miss Holloway's borrowed dresses, this one a pretty green calico that brought out the hazel flecks in her brown eyes. You look lovely, dear, Mrs. Holloway commented as Lillian came down for breakfast. Matt won't know what hit him. Lillian blushed. Mrs. Holloway, I'm not. Oh, I know, the older woman said with a knowing smile. You're a respectable schoolteacher who's only known the man 2 days. Still, I've never seen Matthew Zimmerman look at anyone the way he looks at you. Before Lillian could formulate a response, a knock sounded at the front door. Mrs. Holloway's smile widened. Right on time. That's a first. Matt stood on the porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and his best jeans. His hair was neatly combed, and Lillian realized he'd made an effort with his appearance. Morning, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face as he took in the sight of her. Ready to see Butte? I am, Lillian replied, accepting the arm he offered. Matt had borrowed a buggy for the occasion, explaining that it would be more comfortable for touring the town than horseback. As they drove down the main street, he pointed out the important buildings: the assay office, the bank, the mercantile, the saloons, which he mentioned but did not suggest visiting. And there's your schoolhouse, he said, stopping the buggy in front of a neat white building with a bell tower. Want to see inside? Lillian nodded eagerly. The schoolhouse was indeed new, as Peterson had claimed. Inside, rows of desks faced a teacher's desk on a small raised platform. A blackboard covered one wall, and bookshelves lined another. It's wonderful, Lillian breathed, running her hand along a desk. Peterson made sure it was done right, Matt said, leaning against the doorframe. His oldest boy's at college back east, now first from Butte to go. He believes in education. Lillian walked to the teacher's desk and sat down, surveying what would be her domain. I can't wait to start. You were born to be a teacher, weren't you? Matt asked, watching her with an unreadable expression. I think I was, Lillian admitted. Even as a child, I preferred books to dolls and was always organizing the neighborhood children for lessons. Matt smiled. My mother was the same way. Taught in a one-room schoolhouse until she married Pa. Then she taught us at home, me and my brothers. You have brothers? Lillian asked, realizing how little she knew about him. 2. Both older. Thomas runs a freight business out of Helena. James is a doctor in Missoula. Matt shrugged. I'm the family disappointment, never settled on a proper profession. I don't think you're a disappointment, Lillian said firmly. Not everyone is meant for the same path. Matt looked at her with surprise, as if he hadn't expected such acceptance. Most women want a man with prospects. Security. I left security behind in Boston, Lillian reminded him. I wanted freedom instead. Something shifted in Matt's eyes. You're not like any woman I've ever met, Lillian Anderson. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. Is that good or bad? She asked, trying to keep her voice light. Definitely good, Matt replied, his gaze so intense that Lillian had to look away. We should continue our tour, she suggested, standing up from the desk. Matt nodded, though he seemed reluctant to break the moment. There's a lot more to see. The rest of the morning was spent exploring Butte. Matt knew everyone, it seemed, and introduced Lillian to shopkeepers, miners, and ranchers' wives. By lunchtime, she felt she had a good grasp of the town's layout and population. They ate at a small cafe where the owner, Mrs. Chun, served a mixture of American and Chinese dishes. Lillian was surprised to see several Chinese families in Butte. They came for the railroad and mining work, Matt explained. Faced a lot of prejudice, but they're becoming part of the community now. Mrs. Chin's son will be one of your students, smart as a whip, according to Peterson. Lillian was impressed by Matt's matter-of-fact acceptance of the Chinese settlers. Many Easterners, including her own father, had held strong prejudices against them. You seem very open-minded, she observed. Matt looked thoughtful. Out here, you learn to judge folks by what they do, not where they come from. Life's too hard to waste energy on foolish hatreds. A wise philosophy, Lillian said, her admiration for him growing. After lunch, Matt had a surprise. I've arranged for you to visit Wilkinson's mercantile. Mrs. Holloway mentioned you lost all your belongings in the robbery. Lillian frowned. I can't impose further. It's not an imposition, Matt assured her. The school board has a fund for the teacher's supplies. Peterson authorized an advance on your salary, considering the circumstances. Lillian was touched by the thoughtfulness. At the mercantile, Mrs. Wilkinson, a cheerful woman with rosy cheeks, helped her select several practical dresses, undergarments, a coat for the coming fall, and teaching supplies. The town's been buzzing about you, Mrs. Wilkinson confided as she wrapped Lillian's purchases. First female teacher we've had, and quite the dramatic arrival. Lillian blushed. Hardly the first impression I hoped to make. Nonsense. Everyone's impressed by your fortitude. 3 days walking in this heat. Most city women would have perished. Mrs. Wilkinson lowered her voice. And arriving in the arms of our most eligible bachelor hasn't hurt your reputation one bit. Now Lillian was truly embarrassed. Mr. Zimmerman was simply being kind. Mrs. Wilkinson's knowing smile mirrored Mrs. Holloway's from that morning. If you say so, dear. When they left the mercantile, Matt insisted on carrying Lillian's packages to the buggy. Where to next? He asked. We've seen most of the town. Could we perhaps see more of the countryside? Lillian suggested. It's so beautiful here. Matt's face lit up. I know just the place. He drove the buggy out of town and up into the hills overlooking Butte. After about 20 minutes, he stopped at a clearing with a spectacular view of the valley below. My special thinking spot, Matt admitted as he helped Lillian down. Not many people know about it. They sat on a fallen log, gazing at the panoramic vista. The town looked tiny from here, surrounded by mountains and endless sky. It's breathtaking, Lillian whispered, afraid to break the peaceful silence. I come here when town gets too crowded, Matt said, or when I need to make a decision. And do you have a decision to make now? Lillian asked, curious. Matt turned to look at her, his expression serious. Maybe I do. Been thinking about putting down roots lately. Lillian's heart quickened. Oh, I thought you preferred freedom. So did I, he said quietly. Things change. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Lillian was acutely aware of Matt's proximity, of the way the afternoon sunlight caught the gold flecks in his blue eyes. Lillian, he began, his voice lower than before. I know we've only just met, but a gunshot cracked through the air, startling them both. Matt was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Stay here, he ordered, scanning the surrounding trees. What is it? Lillian asked, fear gripping her. Before Matt could answer, 3 riders burst into the clearing, guns drawn. Lillian recognized one immediately, the leader of the gang that had robbed her stagecoach. Well, look who we found, the man drawled, his scarred face twisted in a sneer. The little lady who got away, and with Matthew Zimmerman, no less. Matt positioned himself between Lillian and the outlaws. Ryan Blackwell, he said coldly. Still preying on innocent travelers, I see. Just making a living, Blackwell replied with a shrug. Followed your trail from town. Figured you might lead us to something interesting. His eyes shifted to Lillian. She didn't have much worth taking on the stage, but I'm thinking she might be worth something to you now, Zimmerman. You touch her, you're a dead man, Matt said, his voice deadly calm. Blackwell laughed. 3 guns against 1. I like those odds. Everything happened so quickly after that. Matt drew and fired in one fluid motion, hitting one of Blackwell's men in the shoulder. The outlaw fell from his horse with a cry of pain. Lillian dropped to the ground as bullets whizzed overhead. She crawled behind the log, heart pounding, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Matt had taken cover behind a boulder, exchanging fire with Blackwell and his remaining man. The outlaws had dismounted and spread out, trying to flank Matt's position. Seeing a fist-sized rock nearby, Lillian grabbed it. When Blackwell's second man edged too close to her hiding place, she hurled the rock with all her strength, striking him in the back of the head. He staggered, momentarily distracted, and Matt took advantage, putting a bullet in the man's leg. "You'll pay for that," Blackwell shouted, firing wildly in Lillian's direction. Matt used the distraction to break cover, tackling Blackwell to the ground. The 2 men grappled for control of Blackwell's gun. A shot rang out, and for a terrifying moment, Lillian couldn't tell who had been hit. Then Matt stood, Blackwell's gun in his hand. The outlaw lay motionless on the ground, a red stain spreading across his chest. "Matt!" Lillian ran to him, scanning for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Just scraped up," he assured her, though his face was grim. "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from Blackwell's body. "Is he dead?" Matt confirmed. His own gun went off in the struggle. The other 2 outlaws were injured but alive, cursing and moaning on the ground. Matt quickly bound their wounds with strips torn from their own shirts, then used their belts to secure their hands. "We need to get these 2 to the sheriff," he said, his voice detached and professional. "I'll come back for Blackwell's body later." Lillian helped as best she could, still shaking from the encounter. They loaded the injured outlaws onto their horses, Matt tying them securely to their saddles. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, turning to Lillian. "I put you in danger. I should have been more careful." "You couldn't have known they were following us," Lillian replied, touching his arm gently. "And you saved my life again." Matt looked down at her hand on his arm, then covered it with his own. "You're quite the fighter yourself." That rock throw was impressive. Despite everything, Lillian found herself smiling. "My brothers taught me well." They made their way back to town slowly, Matt leading the outlaws' horses while Lillian drove the buggy. The tension of the shootout gradually eased, replaced by a strange intimacy. They had faced danger together and survived a bond neither had expected to form so quickly. Sheriff Jenkins was shocked when they arrived with the captured outlaws and news of Blackwell's death. "The Blackwell gang? You 2 took down the Blackwell gang?" he repeated incredulously. "Miss Anderson helped," Matt said, a note of pride in his voice. "She's got better aim with a rock than most men have with a gun." By sundown, the entire town knew the story. When Matt and Lillian finally returned to the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway was beside herself with worry and relief. "First you're hours late, then we hear you've been in a gunfight with outlaws," she exclaimed, ushering them inside. "Sit down this instant, both of you. You look exhausted." Over a late supper, they recounted the day's events to the Holloways. Mr. Holloway listened with growing respect. "Ryan Blackwell's been terrorizing this territory for 2 years," he said. "The governor had a $500 bounty on him." Matt shrugged. "Never was bounty hunting." "Still, the reward is yours," Mr. Holloway insisted. "And Miss Anderson's, from the sound of it." Lillian shook her head. "I want no part of blood money." "It's not blood money," Matt said gently. "It's compensation for bringing a dangerous criminal to justice. Think of it as restitution for what was stolen from you." Lillian hadn't considered it that way. "Perhaps you're right." After supper, Matt walked Lillian to her room. They paused at her door, suddenly awkward with each other. "Thank you for today," Lillian said. "Despite how it ended, I enjoyed seeing Butte with you." Matt's eyes searched her face. "I meant what I was about to say up there, before we were interrupted. About putting down roots." Lillian's breath caught. "Matt, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we barely know each other. But something tells me we could be good together, Lillian." The raw honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "I feel it too," she admitted. "But you're right, it is too soon. I need time." Matt nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time I can give you." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a soft, brief kiss to her cheek. Sleep well, Lillian. Long after he'd gone, Lillian stood with her fingers pressed to the spot where his lips had touched her skin, wondering how a man she'd known for just 3 days could already feel so essential to her life. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Lillian moved into the small teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse, furnished simply but comfortably by the school board. Matt helped her settle in, bringing furniture from town and building shelves for her books. "You don't have to do all this," Lillian protested as he installed a porch swing he'd made himself. "I want to," Matt replied simply. "Besides, I'm between jobs at the moment." They fell into an easy routine. Matt would appear each morning with fresh bread from the bakery or wildflowers he'd picked on his ride into town. They would spend the day preparing the schoolhouse, organizing books, and planning lessons. In the evenings, they often sat on Lillian's new porch swing, talking until the stars came out. Lillian learned about Matt's childhood on the ranch outside Helena, his brief stint in the Army during the final days of the Civil War, though he'd been too young to see combat, his years working cattle drives and scouting for the Army. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, her father's shipping business, her mother's death when Lillian was 12, and her determination to become a teacher despite her father's initial disapproval. "He came around eventually," she explained one evening. "Paid for my education at the normal school. He was proud when I graduated, I think." "He should have been," Matt said. "You're going to be a wonderful teacher." As the days passed, Lillian found herself falling deeper under Matt's spell. His kindness, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, all of it drew her to him like a moth to flame. Yet she held back, reminding herself that she had come west for independence, not to fall in love. Matt seemed to sense her hesitation and respected it, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But Lillian caught the longing in his eyes sometimes, matching the yearning in her own heart. The day before school was to start, Matt rode up to the cottage with a beautiful bay mare. "What's this?" Lillian asked, coming down the porch steps. "Your new mount," Matt said proudly. "Can't have Butte's schoolteacher walking everywhere." Lillian stroked the mare's velvety nose. "Matt, I can't accept. She's part of your reward for helping capture the Blackwell gang," Matt explained. "I used some of the bounty money. The rest is in an account at the bank in your name." Touched beyond words, Lillian leaned her forehead against the mare's neck. "She's beautiful." "Thank you." "Her name's Penny," Matt said. "Peterson's best breeding stock. Gentle but spirited. Like someone else I know," Lillian teased, looking up at him. Matt's smile was warm. "Want to try her out? We could ride up to the lake. Celebrate your last day of freedom before the students descend." The idea was tempting. "What about preparing for tomorrow?" "Everything's ready," Matt assured her. "You've been working nonstop for a week. You deserve a break." An hour later, they were riding side by side through pine forests, Lillian growing more comfortable with Penny's gait with each passing mile. The mare was indeed gentle, responding to the lightest touch of the reins. "You're a natural," Matt observed. "City girl or not, you were born to ride." Lillian laughed, feeling freer than she ever had. "I think I was born for this place. Everything feels right here." "Everything?" Matt asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lillian met his gaze. "Everything." The lake, when they reached it, was a crystal blue jewel nestled among the mountains. They picketed the horses in a grassy area and spread a blanket Matt had brought for a picnic lunch. "This is paradise," Lillian sighed, leaning back on her elbows and tilting her face to the sun. "Thank you for bringing me here." "My pleasure," Matt said, watching her with undisguised admiration. "You belong in the sunshine." Lillian felt herself blushing under his gaze. Over the past week, they had grown closer, but always maintained a careful distance physically, at least. Now, sitting beside him on the blanket, she felt that distance shrinking. "Lillian," Matt began, his voice serious. "There's something I need to tell you." She sat up, suddenly nervous. "What is it?" "I've been offered a job. A permanent one. Peterson wants me to run his northern pasture operation. It would mean staying in one place. Having a real home." Lillian's heart leapt. "Are you going to take it?" "I told him I needed to think about it," Matt said, his eyes never leaving her face. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" Lillian asked, though she knew the answer. Matt reached out, taking her hand in his. "Because what I decide depends on you. On us. If there could be an us." Lillian felt tears spring to her eyes. Matt, I know it's fast, he said quickly. I know you came west to be independent, not to tie yourself to someone. But I think we could build something good together. Something that wouldn't diminish either of us. Lillian looked down at their joined hands. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of you of losing myself again. In Boston, with Thomas, I started to disappear. My dreams, my wants, all secondary to his. I can't do that again. I would never want you to be anything less than who you are, Matt said fervently. The woman who walked for 3 days through the wilderness. The woman who faced down outlaws with nothing but a rock and her courage. The woman who's going to shape the minds of Butte's children. That's the woman I'm falling in love with. The word hung in the air between them. Love. It was too soon, too fast, and yet, Lillian knew it was true for her as well. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. Matt's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But as Lillian responded, it deepened, becoming a conversation of its own, a promise, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Matt rested his forehead against hers. Does this mean you think I should take the job? He murmured. Lillian laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. I think you should do what makes you happy. You make me happy, he said simply. The rest is just details. They spent the afternoon by the lake, talking about possibilities, about hopes and dreams and fears. Lillian found herself imagining a future with this man, a future that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her independence. I won't ask you to give up teaching, Matt assured her as they packed up to leave. Not now, not ever. And I won't ask you to be someone you're not, Lillian replied. If you ever feel the need to wander again, I won't, Matt interrupted. Not without you, at least. Maybe we could explore together during school holidays. The idea of adventures with Matt by her side was enticing. I'd like that. They rode back to town as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the trail. Lillian felt different, somehow lighter, as if a weight she hadn't known she was carrying had been lifted. At her cottage, Matt helped her unsaddle Penny and settle the mare in the small stable behind the house. Then he walked Lillian to her door. Nervous about tomorrow? He asked. A little, she admitted. First days are always challenging. You'll be wonderful, Matt said with absolute confidence. And I'll be here when school lets out, if you want to tell me all about it. Lillian smiled, touching his cheek. I'd like that very much. He kissed her again, this time with a deeper hunger that left her clinging to him, all thoughts of propriety forgotten. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. I should go, Matt said reluctantly. You need your rest for tomorrow. Lillian nodded, though part of her wanted to ask him to stay. Good night, Matt. Good night, my Lillian, he replied, the possessive making her heart flutter. Dream of me. I will, she promised, watching him mount his horse and ride away, knowing with certainty that he would return. The next morning, Lillian stood before her 28 students, feeling a curious blend of nervousness and confidence. The children watched her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Good morning, she began. I'm Miss Anderson, your new teacher. I've come all the way from Boston to be here, because I believe education is the greatest gift one person can give another. As she spoke, she saw the skepticism in some faces give way to curiosity. By lunchtime, she had learned all their names and begun to understand their different personalities and needs. True to his word, Matt was waiting when school dismissed for the day. Several of the children nudged each other and giggled when they saw him. That's Mr. Zimmerman, one girl whispered loudly to Lillian. Pa says he's sweet on you. Lillian felt her cheeks heat. Run along now, Eliza. I'll see you tomorrow. As the children dispersed, Matt approached, a bouquet of wildflowers in hand. For the teacher, he said with a grin. How was your first day? Lillian accepted the flowers, breathing in their sweet scent. Challenging, rewarding, exhausting, wonderful. Sounds about right, Matt laughed. Want to tell me about it over dinner? Mrs. Chun promised me her special chicken if I brought you by. I'd love that, Lillian said. Let me just put these in water first. As they walked to her cottage, Matt's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Lillian marveled at how right it felt, this connection neither had expected, but both now cherished. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Lillian taught during the day, sometimes staying late to help struggling students. Matt worked at the Peterson Ranch, proving himself so capable that Peterson soon offered him a partnership rather than just employment. In the evenings, they were almost always together, either at Lillian's cottage or riding through the countryside. Sundays were spent with the Holloways or the Petersons, who had both taken a parental interest in their relationship. As autumn painted the hills in gold and crimson, Matt began building a small house on a piece of land Peterson had deeded to him as part of their partnership agreement. It was halfway between the school and the ranch, perfect for both their needs. "It's not much," Matt apologized as he showed Lillian the partially constructed home. "Just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor. But there's room to expand." "It's perfect," Lillian assured him, visualizing where furniture would go, where books would line the walls. "I love it already." Matt looked at her intently. "Enough to share it with me?" "As my wife." Though Lillian had suspected this was coming, the actual question still took her breath away. "Are you asking me to marry you, Matthew Zimmerman?" "I am," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Lillian. I think I started falling for you the moment I found you on that trail, too tired to take another step. You're the strongest, most beautiful, most inspiring woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Lillian's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Matt swept her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed with pure happiness. When he set her down, he pulled something from his pocket, a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slid it onto her finger. "Pa gave it to her the day they decided to build their ranch. He said it was the color of the Montana sky, a promise of freedom and possibility." Lillian admired the ring, then looked up at Matt, her heart full. "Freedom and possibility. That's exactly what you've given me, Matt. What we'll build together." Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve in the town's small church, decorated with pine boughs and candles. The entire community turned out to celebrate Lillian's students, the Petersons, the Holloways, shopkeepers, miners, and ranchers. Mrs. Holloway cried throughout the ceremony, and even Mr. Peterson was seen wiping away a suspicious moisture from his eyes. Martha Peterson had made Lillian's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim. As they exchanged vows, Lillian looked into Matt's eyes and saw their future reflected, their years of love and partnership, of challenges overcome together, of a life richer than either had imagined possible when fate brought them together on that dusty trail. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Matt cupped Lillian's face gently in his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Zimmerman," he whispered before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their bond. Their house was finished enough to move into after the wedding, though Matt continued to work on improvements throughout that first winter. Lillian maintained her teaching position, often grading papers by lamplight, while Matt carved furniture or built shelves for their growing collection of books. Spring brought new beginnings. Lillian's garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers. Matt's partnership with Peterson flourished, the northern pasture operation becoming the most productive part of the ranch. "I have news," Lillian said one evening as they sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Matt turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Good news, I hope?" Lillian took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "The best news. We're going to have a baby." The joy that spread across Matt's face was a sight Lillian knew she would treasure forever. "A baby," he repeated in wonder. "When Dr. Wilson thinks late October," Lillian replied. "I'll be able to start the school year at least." Matt pulled her into his arms. "A teacher like her mother, or a rancher like her father? Or both," Lillian suggested. "Or something entirely different. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Freedom to choose. Freedom and possibility," Matt agreed, kissing her tenderly. Their son, William Thomas Zimmerman, arrived on a crisp October morning just as the first snow dusted the mountaintops. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. "He's perfect," Matt whispered, holding his son for the first time. "Absolutely perfect." Lillian watched her husband cradle their child, overwhelmed by love for them both. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she admitted. "When I decided to come west, I was looking for independence, not love. And you found both," Matt said, sitting beside her on the bed. That's what makes us work, Lil. We're better together, but still ourselves. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you ever think about that day? When you found me on the trail? Every day, Matt replied honestly. I thank God for sending me that way at that moment. For letting me be the one to carry you those last 5 miles. Those miles changed everything, Lillian murmured, reaching out to touch their son's tiny hand. They led us home. As young William grew, so did their family and their dreams. Lillian eventually became the headmistress of Butte's growing school system. Matt's partnership with Peterson expanded to include several more ranches, making him one of the territory's most successful cattlemen. But their greatest achievement, they both agreed, was the family they built together, 3 children who grew up understanding that love and respect go hand in hand, that strength comes in many forms, and that the greatest adventures are those shared with those you love. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep, Matt and Lillian would ride out to his special thinking spot overlooking Butte. There, under the vast Montana sky, they would remember how their story began with a woman too tired to walk another step, and the cowboy who carried her the last 5 miles to a love neither had been looking for, but both had been waiting for all along. Years passed, and Butte grew from a mining town into a thriving city. Their children grew too, William following in his father's footsteps as a rancher, their daughter Emma becoming a teacher like her mother, and the youngest, James, surprising everyone by studying law and eventually becoming Montana's youngest district judge. Through it all, Matt and Lillian's love remained constant, a foundation upon which an extraordinary life was built. They faced hardships together, drought years, mining accidents that affected the town, the occasional outlaw trouble, but they also celebrated countless joys. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch house that had grown along with their family. As Matt and Lillian stood surrounded by those they loved, Matt leaned down to whisper in his wife's ear, I'd still carry you 5 miles, you know. Or 500. Lillian squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with tears of joy. And I'd still follow you anywhere, Matthew Zimmerman. Anywhere at all. In the end, that's what their love story was about, not just those first fateful 5 miles, but all the miles they traveled together afterward, side by side, partners in every sense of the word, carrying each other when needed, walking tall when possible, but always moving forward together.